hello everyone. Good evening. We are joined by Lee eventually. Thank you for joining us tonight for what will be the final LMPG lock-in for 2024, which is an absurd thing to say, really, because it feels like we've just started the lock-in series as well as the year itself. We've got Lee Cole here tonight, along with Gareth Jones from PPG, whom you may have seen on previous lock-ins. Have you done these before, Gareth?
I think I did a couple when we were actually going through the COVID shutdown. We did a couple of. I didn't do a lock-in. We did webinars. I don't know whether they were called that then.
We just a lock-in is just a fancy way of saying webinar, to be honest. But
I see.
well, good to see that after a few years you're back. So, for those that don't know, PPG is the, I don't know, official name of Johnston's Trade Paints. So Gareth is here to assist with that. We are talking primarily today about Paint360, which is a product, a mold prevention system. I'm not going to try and over-explain too much because I know that Lee's going to do a hell of a lot better job than me, but that is available via Johnston's Decorating Centres. So worthwhile having them both here to talk about A, what the product is and what it does, and B, actually how we access it as well. So we first started speaking to Lee Cole at Paint360 about 3 years ago. As it so happens, it's quite timely to be talking publicly now with everything that's happening in the sector. But we started these conversations initially a long time ago. This has been a kind of a long time coming. So I'm really looking forward to seeing again what progress has been made, what the product's all about. If you guys want to get involved yourself, you are all muted to begin with. That's just to stop dogs barking, crisp packets rustling, etc. You're welcome to either A, unmute yourself and ask a question directly, or B, use the chat function, which you can see down at the bottom of your screen somewhere. I'm not sure if I can find it. Oh, it's here. And ask a question in. Myself and Laura Lee will be, I don't know why I just forenamed you there, Laura LMPG. Myself and Laura will be looking at that throughout. So we're going to have a bit of a Q&A session at the end. But if you do have a particularly pertinent question to what's going on, we can address it there and then. I think that's about it for my introduction. I will say, actually, and I should have said nearer to the beginning, this is being recorded. So it is going to go up onto the LMPG website after the fact. If you don't want to be in that recording, that's absolutely fine, but you'll need to turn your camera off and unmute yourself and all the rest of it. Otherwise, I think that's it from me. Take it away. Laura, have you got the slides ready to share? And Lee, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
And can I say, just before we start, Lee, you are magnificently well lit.
Thank you.
Right, there we go. Can everyone see it first?
Yes.
I think that's the old slides.
Oh, you're...
Yeah.
Don't do this to me, Lee.
I can do it. I can do it. I can do it as it is.
Oh, no, we're going to get the fresh slides. While Laura sorts that out, Lee, do you want to just introduce who you are?
Yeah. My name's Lee Cole. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Paint360. And we are a social enterprise. I'm eating into some of my slides here, who established themselves in 2012 with the first purpose of finding a way of making use of the mountain of unwanted leftover paint generated year on year in the UK. And so the UK on average produces 55 million litres of unwanted material. And I must say there's a huge difference between what everybody talks about, waste paint and leftover paint. We process unwanted paint. So the paint's perfectly good before we start. And what we do is we go about making that into a product that we think is fit for the marketplace.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever asked this, but it's just come to me now while you've been speaking. I don't quite know what your background is. How did you find out? How did you know of all of the waste paint that was the problem to address in the first place?
I was a consultant for a marketing company for a while, and I got to meet a guy that had an idea about recycling paint, and eventually we set up a business together. He's since retired, so I've sort of taken it over from there. But he was a trained paint chemist, and so
wow.
that's how it all started. Really, it was his beginnings. But he was a mature gentleman at the time, so he's now enjoying his retirement.
Lovely. I didn't expect you to say that. Have we now got the correct slides up, Laura?
I've got mould deck 3.
Wow, mold deck 3. We're on.
We're there. We're there.
Good one tonight.
We're
Let's
there.
go.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for your time this evening. Here to talk to you about mold treatment and how Paint360 got to become involved in actually making a range of products to help treat mold and prevent it coming back. But before we do that, probably best to give you a little bit of background about the business. And if you could click on the next slide, please, Laura. We're a husband and wife team, and as you can see, we have a dog that sort of ends up running the business more than anything. We seem to run around after her more than anything else. We're very close. I wouldn't say corporate business, but we're very close business, not only with the family, but also all of our staff. It's a very relaxed atmosphere that we try and generate within the business. And I'm incredibly good at creating havoc, and my wife's incredibly good at organising us. And so, as you can see in the slide, I'm a great believer in profit, but I like conscious profit, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. Next slide, please, Laura. So we established in 2012. As I was saying earlier, we really wanted to look at a way of impacting the 55 million litres of waste paint that's generated in the UK year on year. A large portion of that, 80% of that material is perfectly good paint, and perhaps there's not enough in the can to make for the person that purchased the goods in the beginning to be able to use it or to complete a room. And so we have long-standing contracts now with most of the waste management companies. We also have long-standing relationship with retail and also manufacturing to receive this material in and to reprocess it. We became a social enterprise 6 years ago after trading for near enough 6 years. We didn't know what social enterprise was as a business back then. It wasn't until one of our corporate clients told us that we were a social enterprise by employing young people with barriers to employment. So we explored that opportunity with Social Enterprise UK and registered as a social enterprise in the UK, and we're now promoted by Social SE UK as a leading social enterprise organisation. And we became partners to PPG. Gareth will correct me on this, I think 2 years ago, after basically stalking them for 6 or 7 years, saying that we should be working together and that we should be doing more. And the relationship started during COVID, and it's growing fantastically from there. Next slide, please. So what do? We take unwanted leftover paint from all over the UK. Our furthest client is the Isle of Wight. Paint's no different to any other leftover unwanted material. It's how you categorize it that's the key. And so we bring the material in and we sort it into sections and into piles. And so if you take white as a color or as a color, you've got undercoat, you've got silk, satin, gloss, contract emulsion, masonry paint, eggshell. We segregate it to that length. And then once we've done that, we then decant all the material into a vat, and we homogenize that material to make a consistent paint before we filter it. And part of that process, we sterilize it to make sure there's no bacteria. And in doing so, we found out that we save in excess of 1.33 kilograms of embedded carbon per litre, which is a huge amount. I mean, 1.3 kilograms is about a transit size van doing 5 miles. That's about the same carbon output. And so, and in doing so, obviously, once we've decanted the paint, we've got a load of plastic and metal paint pots that we also recycle in our factory. And our plastic paint pots go back into making new paint pots that we put our paint into. And of course, I've already mentioned the social enterprise. So in a nutshell, that's what we do as a business. Next slide. So what causes mold? And you've got to be very careful what you say to your tenants and how you ask these questions. But the reality is humidity and condensation are the major leaders towards mold. Unless you've got an issue with the building itself. And what happens is you create all this humidity in the property, and new properties are becoming more and more airtight because people are more and more conscious about energy bills, that actually this moisture gets trapped. And what it does is it looks for cold spaces to sort of link to. And what happens then is it creates a condensation that settles in the corner, and then what you've got is the ideal breeding ground for creating mold. And so there's a technical phrase, and it's different for every room, but when warm air meets a cold surface, you get what's known as dew point. And that's a technical phrase, but it's a very complicated calculation. If you look it up online, I'm sure you could work it out. I couldn't personally, but I know that's what causes all of these, all the ideal conditions to create a mold. And so this is why you see that mold thrives against uninsulated walls, around windows, and around kitchens and bathrooms, because of large volumes of humidity, not necessarily the space for that humidity to escape. It settles somewhere, and you get what the industry calls cold spots. And so lack of ventilation is a massive issue in all new properties, and it's something you really need to consider when you're maintaining your property further down the road, because you can do a lot of prevention with putting the right ventilation into kitchens and the right ventilation into bathrooms. But having said that, in the social housing market that we've been working with, what they found is a lot of people then disconnect those fans, and so because they're trying to conserve energy. So you have got that educational piece that you need to do with your tenants. Next slide, please.
Just on that point, Lee, I think we've mentioned webinars past about the necessity for proper ventilation and the necessity for tenants to be aware of it. I think one of the big problems with this is that although the mold itself is visible, the moisture in the air up until that point isn't. So it appears to come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy in a very similar space to you, who said that 80–90% of all mold related issues are actually down to behavior. They're behavioral issues of fans not being turned on and washing being on the radiators, etc., etc., etc. Now, I don't know whether you're in a position to confirm or deny that. Whether I know it's a dangerous ground to be stepping on, but is that something that you've heard as well?
Yeah, it's a large sort of proportion of what causes the mold. There's a slide on this in a little while, really, but there's some really common things and easy things to do. But we recently had new windows put in our home upstairs, and we had mold as soon as we put the new windows in. We began to see mold in one of the corner of the eaves because we got dormers on the house.
Mm.
And I said to my wife forever, look, you've got to open the window if you're having a shower. If you don't open the window when you're having a shower or after that, let that moisture escape. Because the showers that she has are like, well, they melt your skin off. I don't know how she does it, but she manages to do that. And so we got mold, and so we had to treat it ourselves. And it's simply because we didn't let the moisture out of the room. And so, you know, I've seen that firsthand in our own property.
I feel that I'm going to step on a slide. So if the answer is I'll cover that later, just tell me you'll cover it later. But what we're talking about now is ventilation, opening windows, maintaining a consistent heat, insulation, that kind of thing. That's preventing it in the first place. But that's not what you're here to talk about. You're here to talk about fixing it later on down the line. And is that also prevention, or is prevention still necessary?
I think you need to do both. I think you need to be mindful that you're doing both. At the end of the day, it's your property, and so you know you don't want those maintenance costs. So what you know, it's in your best interest to make sure that that you're advising your tenants correctly, and that you don't need products like ours. I know that's not the best commercial advice from a Paint360 point of view, but that's the best thing to do.
Thank you.
So how do they work? Spores. Spores are they're airborne all the time. And so indoors and outdoors, we breathe them in all the time. And, you know, with large volumes of air, I don't want to say they're not dangerous, but the concentrated version of it being in a room, especially if you're sleeping in it with no windows open, it's going to have a bigger impact on you than if you're outdoors. And so these spores, what they do is they're floating around all the time, and what they look for are these areas that are rich in moisture, got good heating, and so they can settle in. And what they'll do is they'll burrow into your plaster, and they'll start to produce spores that you see on the surface, which in most cases is like a black furry thing. And so actually getting to the spores is a key on if you're going to do any maintenance and you're going to look to remove mold from your property, you really need to think about how you get to the spores. But they are around all year, and if they can come into touch with your skin, it can give you problems. But generally speaking, most people I end up talking to, it's not a huge impact on them. But there are a few people that it's a massive impact on, and it doesn't seem to be much of a middle ground. You're either not really affected by it, or you're hugely affected by it, and that seems to be, you know, the general consensus when you talk to people. Next slide. So what it actually does, and there are 3 different types of mold. I don't want to go into them, but that they all attack your respiratory system. And so if you're in a concentrated area, you will find that it will affect all of your breathing. And if you suffer from asthma, then it's going to affect you more. The NHS spends over 1.4 billion a year on illnesses associated to this. And this really goes into why the government are looking at what happened recently, and looking at how they want to impact social housing and private landlords because of the cost. This is the main driver. And so most of the risks are to the elderly or children. And you do find mold in a multitude of colours. Most common ones are black. You'll also find white, purple quite rarely, and green. And when you find a highly contaminated area, you'll also discover that it sometimes attracts a smell to it. And you know the smell, it's a damp, musky smell. Next phase. So Labour is set to push on a new bill. It really mirrors Awaab's law in social housing, and it's going to be, it's had a huge impact in social housing, and it will have a huge impact, I believe, in the rental market. In the social, and I'm going to come on to what they do in the social housing market. But the upshot of it all is if you fail to take action, then you're risking and I don't like this phrase, but the ambulance chasers of the legal profession, you're risking those guys making money from you, because that's all they're doing, and we already see it in social housing, and I think that will follow through into the private landlord section. Next slide. So what is Awaab's law? It's a really tragic case. It's a young boy that died, only 2 years old, in a really contaminated property. Off the back of that, the government introduced the new law. All social housings companies have to investigate within 14 days and make general repairs within a week. And so that's not necessarily decorating, but that is making sure that the property is safe and making sure that it's sterilized. And so and one of the things that we've heard from other landlords in the social housing market, if you don't document what you're doing and when you approach and how you approach and record all of that information, then you're leaving yourself open to legal. And I know that you work with an organisation within LMPG that can advise you better than me in this area, but I know it's in social housing, it's a very, very big thing.
Yeah, I think in the webinar we had with Landlord Support Legal Solutions, this was one of the hot button topics. Of course, the Renters' Rights Bill was as well, but that combined with Awaab's law, it's a huge issue at the minute in the public rental sector. It's kind of the main thing that they're focusing on, where it was fire safety a few years ago following on from Grenfell. Unfortunately, in this case, as you say, it was tragic. I believe personally it was inevitable. If it hadn't have happened now, it would have happened somewhere else around the country, because there is such a high percentage of publicly available properties and privately rented properties as well, where this is an issue. So I think they're kind of coming down with a bit of a sledgehammer. And as you say, I was reading up on some of the legal cases and the breadth of legal cases that surround this topic and surround the topic of disrepair in public rentals. The mind boggles. It is millions upon millions of pounds every single year, from some justifiable cases, other cases where they think, well, that enough money's going out that they can make something for themselves. So
yeah, what you find in the social housing market, people are using it to try and get a better property, or like you say, get a financial payout. And so there is quite a lot of that happening. Now, there are cases where, you know, properties are severe, but most of the properties that you hear about, they're very manageable. And I think that's the key, really, is showing that you're responding and that you're dealing with the issue, and you're not just putting your head in the sand. And I think that's a key point, really, when you're managing the potential of Awaab's law.
I think that's what makes this such an important issue. Is a picture of mold spores in any room, it has connotations of this property is not fit for purpose. This is an uninhabitable property straight off the bat. But also it can be so hard to diagnose, it can be so hard to prevent, so hard to control. So I think what we're all here today to find out is, okay, when we first see these signs, what do we do? What are the steps? How quickly can we get this sorted and back to a point where we can say, okay, that issue is now done?
Anthony, if I can just jump in, if I may,
Sure.
just on that point. As a layperson, I've spoken to a lot of people about mold, and there seems to be a knee-jerk reaction that they reach for the bleach bottle, and they clean it off with bleach. That is the first thing that a lot of people tend to do. I spoke to you a long time ago, Lee, and you said no, that's the wrong process. Can you just expand on that so people know what we're saying?
Bleach is a food to 99% of the molds that you see. You will clear what looks to be the spots on the surface, but actually all you're doing is feeding the spores within the plaster. And so if you go onto any forum of any note who talk about mold, they'll tell you never to use a bleach or a bleach derivative to clean the actual problem. It doesn't work, and in fact, it only helps it spread.
Do you know what I did over the weekend?
You bleached it. Yeah.
I've just moved house about a month ago. We've got 1930s property, bay windows. Some mold starting to appear beneath the bay windows. And before Googling anything, I just thought, right, bleach that, sort that out. I did exactly that. I then researched it after the fact. So yeah, I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed.
But if you don't know, you don't know, and that's just the it is the common thing that everybody seems to think works. But actually, if you speak to the specialist mold treatment companies, they say it's a big taboo. Don't ever do it. Yeah.
Sorry, what should you use instead of bleach?
Well, you've got two issues. First of all, you've got the spores that you need to sterilize and you need to neutralize, and then you've got a stain. And so a stain, any sort of pH neutral detergent will work. You don't need to worry about killing the spores if you use a sterilizer first. You just need to concentrate on removing the black marks so that you can, or whatever color the marks are, so you can paint over them. It is just a stain once you've used a sterilizer. And so a stain, much like any other stain.
You'll be going through your own process, right? What your sterilizer is, how you apply it, everything else, Lee.
Yeah, we'll go through that in a second. And we've got a video to show you how we recommend to use our products. But it is a big misconception that bleach is a useful tool to combat mold, but it doesn't work.
Chris just put a great question in the chat. I'm going to pick up on that later on, but I'll let you carry on for now, Lee.
Okay. Next slide. Oh, perfect timing. So this is the probably heard enough of me talking right now. So if this is a video that we developed for the trade that's available on a QR code, I have no idea what QR stands for, on our labels on our cans, but I do know if you click it and you play it, then you get to see how to use our products and the products that we recommend.
Paint360 mold removal system is a two-stage process. First, clean and sterilize. Second, protect and decorate. Open all windows in the room and doors to create airflow before you start. Mold may have a negative impact on your health, and better ventilation will drive humidity down and minimize the risk. For rooms with high levels of moisture and
Laura, you've paused it.
That's not me.
Your polls interrupted it.
So my poll has interrupted it. Can you continue playing, or do I need to undo my poll?
Please undo your poll.
Okay, I will look into how I do that. All right, I did say that there was going to be a problem with the video, as there always is. I didn't realize that I would be that problem. Right, let's see if I can find where my poll is.
I'm just going to see if I can play it now.
extreme condensation, please consider using a dehumidifier before
It's come again. Is that you?
Stop me.
work commences, 3 to 7 days prior. To sterilize a room, you must neutralize all spores that reside within the affected wall area and clean any mold stain from the surface. You will need the following PPE: goggles or safety glasses with side shields giving complete protection to eyes, EN166. Chemical-resistant gloves, EN374. FFP3 face mask. For bad mold cases, a disposable overall. Stage 1, clean and sterilize. Before application, please do not scrape any mould from the surface, as this will release unnecessary spores into the atmosphere. Clean mould stains from the surface. Dilute CitraClean 10% to 90% where possible with warm water into a trigger spray or use pre-diluted squirt. If no trigger spray is available, dilute into a bucket and use a sponge to soak the stain. Leave for a couple of minutes before removing with a sponge scourer. Repeat this action until no stains are left. Fungi blitz. Dilute 50-50 with warm water and apply using a sponge or paintbrush to the affected area and at least 1 meter all around. The solution seeps into the walls and once dried will begin to neutralize any spores. Wherever possible, dry the wall whilst continuing to ventilate the room. 24 hours is the ideal drying time. The anti-spore agent degrades as it neutralizes spores, so the more liberal the coating, the greater the chance of residual protection. Please note, the greater the infestation, the shorter any residual protection will be. Stage 2. Protect and decorate. Mould seal. Better described as a clear paint solution which encases the fungicides to offer greater ongoing future protection while doubling up as a stain blocker. Once you have left Fungi Blitz for 24 hours, you can apply mould seal covering the same area. Mould seal will reside on and in the wall, protecting against any future attacks, and much like Fungi Blitz, protection will decrease when the agent is active, neutralizing spores. Once the surface is touch dry, you may paint the area with mould-resistant eggshell or mould-resistant matte emulsion paint. Painting. Both paint solutions have Quat Biocide fungicidal solution evenly dispersed, which act as the third barrier helping to protect against future attacks and high levels of humidity. We highly recommend mould-resistant eggshell for kitchens and bathrooms, as the eggshell is a tougher paint that offers an element of both water resistance and wipeability once dry. Q&A. Do I always ventilate the room? Yes, it will help with the curing of products and dilute the volume of airborne spores. Can I scrape the black mould from the walls? Best not to, as you would be releasing spores unnecessarily. What's the safest way to remove black stains? CitraClean diluted 10% to 90% warm water. Ideally fill a squeegee bottle and spray the affected area. Add Fungi Blitz solution once the stain has been removed. May I add Fungi Blitz twice for really bad infestations? Yes, for very bad mould infestations, leave for 10 minutes before applying CitraClean to remove the black marks. Once these have been removed from the surface, reapply Fungi Blitz and leave. What do we do if the wall is wet from condensation? First, process the wall as you would normally. Remove mould as previously advised. Once removed, dry the surface as best you can with blue towel. Reapply Fungi Blitz and leave to work. 24 hours is the ideal drying time. What if we can't get back to the property for anything over 5 days? Reapply Fungi Blitz and leave until touch dry. Then apply mould seal to the area. Once this is touch dry, you can apply the paint. What do we do with wallpaper? If you have mould on a wall with wallpaper or lining, it needs to be removed before beginning the process. What PPE do we need? Goggles, gloves when using the products. When dealing with mould, a FFP3 face mask. Which paint should I use where? Mould-resistant eggshell for the kitchen and bathroom, and mould-resistant matte emulsion everywhere else. How do I dispose of any leftover paint or packaging? Please refer to the can regarding safe disposal of any leftover product and packaging.
Next slide, please, Laura. So these are the products. The video is very warts and all, and it has to be because it's aimed at social housing. When we did our bathroom at home, we didn't have to use CitraClean because the mold was quite light, and I got to it very, very quickly. So we only used the 3 products. So there is an element of you being able to cut your cloth according to the stain and the infestation itself. It is ideally done in 2 stages, but we do know in social housing that's not always possible. And so the important thing to note is that both Fungiblitz and Mold Seal are water derivatives, and they only start working when the water element that takes the product into the center of the substrate evaporates. And that's why we say 24 hours in an ideal situation, but you don't always have that as an option. As soon as the water's evaporated, they'll start to do their job either way.
Worth using a dehumidifier to help it dry, or is that going to negatively impact the process?
It won't negatively impact the process. It just depends on how much condensation you've got in the room and what time of year it is. If you've got heating, and you can have the heating on with the windows open, then usually you won't need an air humidifier. The reason that we have that in the video is a lot of the social housing have been properties have been empty for a number of months before they get to them, and so we have to account for all.
Thank you. And I've had a great question just roll in. Before I ask it, I just want to ask, can we just go through these steps really quickly to make sure that I've got it right in my head and anyone watching this after the fact gets it right in their head? CitraClean is there to clean the initial area, get rid of the visible
Stains
mold
on the surface. Yeah.
Yeah. The fungi blitz is to kill the spores themselves that's
Yeah.
buried into that plaster.
Yeah.
The mold seal is to then seal it all in so that it can't come out again.
It leaves a future protection within the plaster.
Okay. And then the paint goes over the top, and that in itself is mold resistant as well. So you're looking at, and it's not just going to happen again a week later.
No.
Okay.
No.
Fine. Great.
And
Thank
the
you.
other thing to say as well is, it does depend on how bad the stain is. If you've got a really bad stain on your wall, on it throughout the property, then I would suggest using Fungiblitz first to neutralize all the black mold that you see on the surface before cleaning it away. But if you've just got patches, very small patches around the window or in certain parts of the property, then you can use CitraClean first to clean the stain and then sterilize. So you really got to make a judgment call as to whether or not, for your own safety, whether or not you think it's a particularly bad case of mold. And actually, if it is a really bad case of mold, I would always advise you to speak to a specialist and get a specialist in.
Natasha has asked, what are the active ingredients of these products? Reason being, a lot of people with mold sensitivity are also sensitive to a lot of chemicals. So,
yeah,
you won't want to inflame that by trying to prevent the problem.
Right. So you're talking about VOCs here, and VOCs and semi-volatile organic compounds. You're looking at a material that's less than 1% of the total volume. And so there are no real smells to this product, hence why we use water, because it cuts down on the VOCs that are emitted from using the product. And so there are little to no evidence of any VOCs causing any harm while in process over and above using a normal paint. Right, so when we first come to make our range of products, we were asked by one of our corporate clients who were managing the social housing in Birmingham to look at the market and see whether or not we could make a range of products that would do what they wanted but more cost effectively. And so recently we were asked to put some sort of comparison together on the marketplace and which products we see as being, which companies have that an equivalent to what we offer and which companies don't. And to be honest with you, the main competitor for us is a company called Mould Growth Consultancy. Their products are brilliant. They really are. They're expensive. and hence why we looked at their products as the benchmark to create our own. And so this slide's available if anybody wants it. What you will find with mold treatment products, they're incredibly expensive, and we believe unnecessarily so.
It's funny, actually. I've seen this slide before. I think I'd asked you the same question because, as I said, it's such a hot button topic in the public rental sector and moving into private as well, that I have had calls and emails and introductions and all that sort of thing to dozens of companies that are doing a very, very similar thing, very similar products. And my head was spinning. I had no idea what was what, whose was actually working. And I think this is the danger of this is if everyone claims that they've got the magic bullet, it's very difficult to kind of pass that and see who's telling the truth and who's not. So I think that this is incredibly useful. I found this incredibly useful. The one thing I would mention here is the primer. So Paint360 not required, so there's no primer. Zinsser have a primer of their own. These others would need a secondary primer, a third-party primer, as it were.
Or an undercoat of some kind. I mean, I'm not an expert in all of their products. I don't want to. They're all great products, by the way. They all work. You just got to make your preferential, your choice. But what we try and do is when we built this slide is just to be open and honest with everybody and say, look, these are our competitors. They're all good products, but the system that we follow, and it's important that you note the system that we follow is definitely a 2-stage, some 3-stage, whereas most of our competitors are paint and go, and they're not. They have products to support the sterilization, but they're not as thorough as the offering that we try and offer.
I think that's what gave me pause when I was talking to a lot of them, is having spoken to you before and knowing that this is 4 separate products taken over, in a specific time frame, in order to fix the root problem. Being given a can of paint and saying, just apply this and that will sort it, but basically painting over the mold, this will sort it out. It's very hard to trust that. Now, I'm not saying that any of these in particular are doing that, but there are others out there that are.
If you don't get to the spores that lie within the substrate and you don't neutralize them, it will come back quicker. You will remove it by using any of these products, but if you want a longer lasting protection, then we would recommend the system.
Thank you.
So, as I said at the beginning of the slide, prevention is always better than cure. So fans are moving on incredibly quickly in this space. We fitted one to a property that we rent out, and that runs. It doesn't have a cord. You can't turn it off. It doesn't have batteries. It's hardwired in. It works automatically because that bathroom doesn't have any windows, and we were experiencing mold in one of the bedrooms, and we know where it was generating from because of my experience within mold. And so be very clear on the fans that you specify and you put in your properties, and ask the electricians to advise you which are the best way of doing that.
Right.
Next thing is to check any air bricks, make sure they've not been blocked, because that's a famous trick that tenants tend to do because they're worried about their heating bills. Another one is try not to have the furniture up against the wall so that you get circulation all the way around the room. It's amazing when you actually check in your own home that you'll see that we automatically do that, and that just prevents circulation as well. And the other thing is, you mentioned how do you know about humidity in a property? Well, there's a big move in the marketplace now around humidity readers, not just in the property, but also that you can access remotely and you can record. So you can then help your tenants understand the humidity in the room and how that's not going to help them moving forward. So there are things that you can do, and they're all relatively cheap. And what we found with one particular client within social housing, they started to use our mold paint as a prevention rather than a cure. So rather than using contract emulsion on their properties that they're renovating, they automatically use a mold paint. Next slide. And so some of these are our clients, Mold Doctor, QST, and TMC. They're specialist mold treatment companies who all use our products. Our two biggest social housing clients are Birmingham City Council and Places for People, who are the biggest social landlord, as I understand. And so this slide's really just to give you a little bit of confidence in that, we wouldn't get to work with these people if our products didn't work, and they do. And as long as you follow the steps, then and you keep yourself safe, you'll have no problems, and you will have protection moving forward. And the last bit to say, of course, we are really proud to be able to distribute this through Johnson's, who are our partner.
I will say, and you were being humble very early on in this presentation. I knew this slide was coming up, which is why I didn't jump in and get down your throat about it. But you said, we like to think that these products work. The situation is you're working with all these people who have got, we've spoken a little bit about the pressure that is on social landlords, that is on these types of companies. This is a real testament to the product. That being said as well, Gareth was being rather humble, because at every Johnson's event I've been to, they've been shoving Paint360, the recycling side of it and the mold prevention side of it, down everyone's throat, saying, look, we're working with these guys, aren't we fantastic? They're using you as kind of their little guinea pig of, look how great we are, which is again testament to the product and testament to the company. So I've got a hell of a load of questions that have been coming in, a lot more intelligent than those that I would ever think of myself. Have we got much more of a presentation here?
No, that's about it, really. The next slide is for questions, so you're right on cue, Anthony.
Lovely. Do we have anything that's got contact information?
No, but obviously you can share my email and my number to everybody, really.
Okay, lovely. So Laura, can you pop that in the chat actually? And I'm going to run through some of these questions. The one that I mentioned earlier on, which my scroll bar is not working, so I'm gonna have to try and do it from memory. It was a question, I believe, from Natasha, who'd said that it's all well and good for areas where you're going to experience mold on the walls, but a very common problem is the grout between tiles in a shower and possibly in the kitchen, and silicone as well. What do you do for those two situations? Because of course, as you say, instinctive reaction again is bleach.
The problem that you've got is making the product safe and making it look safe is two different things. Fungi Blitz will neutralize any of the spores, any of the dark stains that you see, but it's not a stain remover within those items. And really, there isn't really a product on the market that can remove the stain element. You can lighten the stain, you can take it all the way down, but you'll still be left with a stain. And so at the moment, we haven't come across a product, and we've tried loads, that will actually remove the stain element from tile grout, and we just haven't found one.
You can fix the problem, but not necessarily the symptoms of the problem. So is bleach completely out of the question?
Yeah, you won't do anything. I mean, you can make the place safe by using Fungi Blitz, and you will neutralize any spores and it will seep in, and it will kill anything that's there. But the sheer nature of those products, allowing allowing the mold to sort of grow within it means it's bonding beyond the surface. If it was just on the surface, you could wipe it clean. It's getting beyond the surface.
Okay, fine. The reason I'm asking is Havesh has said that the quality bleach left on a paper towel rolled up over the silicone for a few hours. Now, there's something that I know a lot of landlords have tried on little cotton wall boards. I've done it myself as well. If you were to do that after using the Fungi Blitz and the CitraClean, would it still act as a food for what is now neutralized?
Because it's neutralized, it's finished. It's dead.
Oh, so you could actually use it after the fact, but using it before would exacerbate the problem.
Yeah.
Similarly, with silicon, let's say, very perhaps easy to replace, easier than grout, certainly. You could just take the silicon off, re-silicon, relatively simple thing to do. But you wouldn't want to do it and then end up in 3 weeks' time, because it happens so quickly with silicon, have the same sort of thing happening. So is there something that you can do once you've applied the silicon, it's dried and everything else? Can you then use a preventative on that to make sure that it doesn't start to darken over the next weeks or months?
I think once you've removed and you've replaced the silicon, you really need to look at how you manage the moisture in the room, because if you remove the moisture out of the room with a proper extractor fan, you won't have the problem.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Go back to what mold requires. Mold requires moisture, heat, and cold spaces, and tiles are ideal for that.
Yeah. And you've got all three of those in the corner of a shower, and it's always the corner, isn't it, where that tends to happen, when water sits.
Yeah, and so if you can make sure that you are removing the moisture out of the room as you use it, then you're less likely to have a mold attack further down the road.
Susan said, can these products be used on all surfaces? So we're kind of an extension to the last question, but she's used examples of wood, paint, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, when you register your product with the HSE, you register it under building materials, which is, I think it's a code 10, and then you have external, which is a code 2. When you get code 10, which is what we did, you get both. And so on any substrate, as long as you apply Fungi Blitz, it will remove and neutralize spores, as long as it seeps into the substrate. So for instance, metal, it's not going to do anything for you, but wood, it would have an impact, yeah.
Rian said, do you have to use Paint360 paint at the final stage, or will any brand do? So I think I had a similar question written down when I watched the video earlier on, which was to say, is it possible to paint over it? So you've cleaned it, you've prevented it, all the rest of it. Now actually using the paint itself, of course, that is mold resistant. Does any paint do, or is it Paint360 is the kind of the best one for the job?
Well, there are other mold resistant paints, but what you're looking to do when you use our product is we put a biocide in to protect the film. So once the paint's dry, it has those biocides sitting there so that mold can't cure on the surface and therefore can't penetrate the surface. If you paint over the surface of that, of course, they will still be behind the paint that you paint with. So it will give you some protection, but it won't necessarily protect that paint that you covered the Paint360 paint with, if that makes sense. Now, there are additives that you can buy, and we are looking to launch some additives ourselves in the next few weeks, that you can stir into any paint, any water-based paint. The problem is with that is we use a high shear mixer to blend the biocides into the paint. And the two problems that you have with that is, one, you can put too much biocide in and it becomes quite a substance that you don't really naturally want to handle. And secondly, when you stir that material in, unless you've got a high shear mixer, you're not going to disperse it 100% correctly. And so then you'll end up with patches of really good protection and patches of not so good protection and patches of no protection. And then it's pot luck whether or not you got the coverage in the area that you want it to be. So in answer to your question, yes, you can use other paints, but then your paint film itself isn't protected at all.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer to the question. It does beg the question. I don't know whether I even want to say it, to be honest, but why are you launching an additive if what you said just makes complete sense? If you're putting in an additive, you're never going to have that same level of distribution within the paint.
A lot of the social housing clients that we work with buy the additive already. And so when we go out to a client and they have a particular color and they want to have I don't want to say a competitor, but a Farron ball color because that's what they had before the outbreak.
Which of course can be color matched by Johnson's decorating centers.
It's
a
way of appeasing the client, really.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing.
Fine. Hazel's asked, would you agree that modernizing older buildings can be the cause of mold as it reduces the ventilation within the property? Things like blocking up fireplaces, double glazing, modern paints and plaster, etc.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we noticed that in our own property. You know, we put modern double glazing on the dormers of our house, and then within 18 months we'd got mold. And so yeah, I can vouch for that as something that we've actually done. We've actually experienced ourselves.
It's so counterintuitive sometimes, but there's such a reliance on insulation, and ventilation has to go hand in hand with that. If you do one without the other, you're causing yourself major issues. I think it comes down to what is obvious and what isn't. It's obvious when you've got a lot of ventilation and no insulation because the house is freezing. But when it's the other way around, the only thing that you see is mold. And for some reason, we as human beings see mold and think, how on earth did that get there? It must be magic. Or it's the horrible landlord who sent that in there. So I think it's worth remembering. Emma's asked, what's the shelf life of the products for steps 1 to 3? So that's the Citraclean, it's the Fungi Blitz, and oh god, what was the third one called?
Mold seal.
Well, they're biocided, so they're as long as you seal the cap, if you use what you need and seal the cap, they're as bad as preserved as any product can possibly be, because the biociding not only does its job, but it protects. If you look at paint and you say, right, why does water-based paint fail eventually? Well, when you open a can of paint, every can of paint has a preserver, but that preserver breaks down over a period of time, and it breaks down due to the conditions that it's stored in and whether or not you've opened the can. Well, as long as you seal the can properly, which is not always possible with a tin of paint, but you can do with the fungicide wash and the mold seal, then you'll be safe to use it. We've never experienced a problem where somebody said, "Oh, I've used your product 3 or 4 years later and it didn't work." So I couldn't actually give you a lifespan on it, but a long time.
You have to put a before date on the can though, right? Or on the bottle, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, we recently bought some biocides from a major biocide manufacturer because his date had run out, and then when we tested this product in-house, there was nothing wrong with it. It was something that we use in the UK market, something that we use when we distribute as a can preserver, an in-can preserver. But ultimately, they don't really go out of date. I mean, yeah, if you're talking, an awful long time, then potentially, but just the sheer nature of what they do protects the solution.
Rune said our painter recommended, and I'm sorry to bring up another competitor here, but our painter recommended Tikkurila Luja 7 as the best paint for kitchens and bathrooms. How does Paint360 compare to this? Is this a product you're aware of?
Not particularly, but I wouldn't mind betting Gareth knows an awful lot about it, because it's it's a PPG product.
I mean, in fairness, Tikkurila is owned by PPG. I'm not an expert on their product range, so I wouldn't be able to support it or deny it. But I do know they make some tremendous products.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be able to comment on the makeup of it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's a high performance eggshell, which with either a sheen or a matte finish. But just to echo what Gareth says, I mean, they're unbelievable products. So, you know, yes, but do they have any protection of biocides in them? I couldn't tell you.
I mean, just on that point, we do a product called Stop Mould in the Johnson's range, which is available. But we have a big gap. And this is why we're so interested in Lee's offering, because whilst we have a preventative measure, which has some anti-mould biocide in it, it's not a system to remove mould or get rid of it. And it's such a problem now that because people can't ventilate buildings, even new buildings, we've got a problem on construction now, where even new buildings, as they go up, because of theft and people stealing boilers and what have you, people have got to shut the windows. So you've got no ventilation going through new construction, and we've got mould. And it's a major problem. So it's not just in the social housing sector or landlords' properties. It's in new build construction now, which is never been heard of before. But it just goes to show how important that air ventilation is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so well insulated. Well, sometimes they're so well insulated, the new builds, but it causes problems in itself. Havesh has got a bit of advice here, and Havesh, if you wouldn't mind explaining what exactly you're talking about, I'll add this on later on. But he says, during inventory check-in, I have a ThermoPro TP50. Now that's the bit I'm unsure of. I don't know what a ThermoPro TP50 is. He has one of those out for a few days and ensures the check-in clerk takes a photo, shows the humidity levels prior to the tenant moving in, so can't blame the landlord as tenants are all rising damp experts. I would agree that the idea and the fear of, well, it's got to be rising damp, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. It's such a sensitive subject to kind of try and have a conversation about, and knowing that I was blown away when I found out the statistics of how much of this is behavioral. I would have estimated 30%, 20%, 30%, but 80, 90%, the vast majority of cases, it's preventable in a way. But of course, preventable implies the knowledge beforehand from the tenant, and also it's expensive to have your heating on full blast all the time and your windows open, and that's the best condition that you can have to stop this from happening. So, you know, there is a level of humanity to it as well. Steve's asked, to what extent is the recurrence of mold reduced by using the system? Presumably, it can come back.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on the conditions, and largely if you've got a structural problem with the property. You do find with some of these odd-shaped houses where maybe roofs proceed further out than the wall of the property and or dormers, they're natural cold spots, and so they're naturally going to heat rises, so they're naturally going to be attracted to that area, and so insulation and making sure that you're thoroughly insulated in those areas is a massive importance. Also, guttering, if you've got, you know, a permanent leaky drain, these are all the things that are going to add to your to the fact that mold will come back quicker. But if you treat it and follow it properly, you know, we've been supplying this product into social housing now for 8 years. We don't get callbacks, we don't get problems with it, we don't get any issues as long as they follow the system.
Right, thank you. To clarify what I was talking about a second ago, Havesh has come back. ThermoPro TP50 digital thermohygrometer, indoor room thermometer with recording and climate indicator, 4-room climate control monitor, available on Amazon. So that is what that is.
It shows you heat patches, and I think I've seen one. I think they're yeah. I mean, they use it to also to see where the heat is escaping out of buildings.
Just as I was talking, my little Alexa device started flashing, and I may very well have just bought one by accident while describing it. Hugh also came back with a suggestion for silicon, which was use Dow Corning 785 silicon in the first place, one of the best on the market and very resistant to mold ever appearing. So not one that I've heard of myself, but thank you very much, Hugh, for the suggestion. He did also ask later on, which I think is important, perhaps something Laura or Gareth might have to field, but I was hoping something like this would come up. So Hughes said he's logged onto his Johnston's online account to see the prices and Paint360 for fungi blitz or just blitz, and nothing's turning up. So actually, we know about the product a little bit now. I'm sure there's a few more questions outstanding that we'll ask. But how do we get hold of them? Because it isn't just as simple as walking into a Johnston. If I go into a Johnston Decorating Centre tomorrow, it's not going to be on the shelf. And is the person at the counter even going to know what I'm talking about?
I'll pick that up, Anthony, thanks. What we've done on the back of the seminar that you did in Birmingham, we have agreed to promote these products each month now till the end of what I call the mould season, which is the end of March. So I always think that there's more chance of a lack of good airflow, certainly through the autumn and into the winter months. So we are promoting the full range of Lee's anti-mould system, including the CitraClean in different sizes. I would say to you, because the products are new to PPG as a system, I would hope the staff know about them. They have been notified through our portal system, so I would hope that's the case. If not, I think the code, did you actually put the promotions on with the codes, Laura?
Yeah, they're all on there.
I mean, if your members are able to quote the codes when going in to purchase these products, all they've got to do is put them in the system and they're there. I think that's why you put them on, Laura, isn't it? Just so as these could be identified. But all I would say is please just feed the information back if there's a problem. We've got an account manager local that can resolve issues in any decorating centre around the UK mainland. And Laura, we tend to try and work together between the team in the office and ourselves to try and get things resolved. So I would like to think in the first instance people would know, but I'm not going to say 100% everybody knows inside out about the system.
And so the codes themselves, what have we got on promotion right now, Laura?
All 4 products.
All 4 products, and
offer.
In various sizes, presumably.
One size for each of them.
One size for each of them. So the codes are all available on there. Where can we see this promotion?
Promotion on the special offers page. We've also got the separate Paint360 page, so it's a separate page to Johnston's. And they've got a price list on there with.
Good. I was hoping you would say that. And that's live on the website now, is it?
Yep.
Okay. Have we done an official partner launch with Paint360?
Yeah.
Okay, great. When did we do that?
It may have been on Halloween. I think it
May
was.
have been on Halloween.
I was going to say, I think it was the 31st.
Fine. Okay. Good, because I know that we've had questions in the office, and I know that members have gone into Johnston's Decorating Centres, asked about the products, and kind of been met with a bit of a dumbfounded look. So it's a little bit of a teething period for the time being, but we've got all the information on our website to equip yourselves with what you need, the prices, what they do. Obviously, this webinar is going to be there as well, what the sizes, all the rest of it. So we should be able to get that get through this teething period relatively painlessly. And there is, I believe, Gareth, it's not stocked actually physically in the store. So pick up the phone, speak to my local Johnson's Decorating Centre. How long is it until I actually get the product?
The product should be there within 48 hours, but I'd always put 72 hours, because if somebody orders it at 5 to 5, it's going to be the next day before it gets ordered. So 48, 72 hours.
Well, thank you. I think that is, well, that's the reason you were here, Gareth, to answer those questions, and I'm surprised it was done so quickly and effortlessly. Lal said, some properties may not have an air brick in all rooms. By introducing one, will this reduce the probability of mould significantly?
I think anything you can do to improve ventilation will have a massive impact.
I think that there's a big question mark over passive ventilation, which would be an air brick, versus active ventilation, which would be something like the fan you mentioned earlier on, which is actively constantly turning that air around all the time. So
Yeah.
obviously you can't put a fan in every single bedroom or anything like that, but it is certainly more effective in those rooms where you're going to have high humidity to go with active ventilation rather than passive ventilation. I know that there is also a big push from some landlords on a PIV system, positive input ventilation system, I think it is, which sits in the loft and effectively pushes out air throughout the house. But I'm not sold on them myself, but I know that those that have used them in the past have attested to their quality. For condensation control advice, best talk to the LMPG partner, Alliance Remedial Supplies, who've got a great leaflet. Thank you, Richard, for saying that. I can't believe that you've said it and I hadn't even thought. But yeah, Alliance Remedial Supplies are a really good company, actually, when it comes to helping out with advice for members on everything damp proofing. So I don't know if you've spoken to them directly, Lee, but they are absolutely a brilliant partner. A small independent merchant down in the south coast, I believe. I'm sure I've got 1,000 different questions here, but I am a little bit all over the place now because I've been scrolling up and down. I'm going to ask one final one, and then have we managed to put Lee's contact details into the chat, Laura? You are on mute. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
There we go. There is a specific tech support email on
right. Yeah, let's put that in.
Page, so I'll get that in.
Okay, lovely. Let's pop that one in, and I'm going to ask one final question, which is Ruth's question, which is, how do the products work on acoustic ceiling tiles that are almost like the old-fashioned polystyrene tiles?
To be honest with you, I don't want to give wrong advice. It depends if they're porous or not. Because if I fear that they may be like silicon and they bond within the you can neutralize the danger of them, but I'm not sure how you would clean the stain without maybe overpainting them. And so it'd be a good one to sort of happy to talk to directly and get a trial with that, because it's not something I know it's been done. And I know other people in social housing have used our products to do that, but I'm guessing they work because I didn't have any feedback from them. Generally, they only want you when there's a problem. And so, yeah, I've never done a live trial myself on that. So it's an interesting one.
Well, we'll pick up the phone tomorrow then with you, Ruth, and see if that's something we can do then. I think a trial might be a good idea. I did say that was going to be my final question, but one came through that was just really good. So I just need to ask this one quickly, which is, when refurbishing properties, you mentioned that you can use the paint as a preventative measure. So if you're refurbing the property, you've got no problem at all. Can you use that just solely replacing the paint and kind of not have to worry so much about neutralizing it, but just using it as a preventative to begin with?
If you haven't got mold in the property already, one of our clients on the slide is Places for People. That's exactly what they do.
Are they using the mold seal as well?
No, it's just preventing. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Look, I'm sure I've got several dozen questions in here because they came through thick and fast and I was a little bit all over the place. But you said at the beginning of this, before we started, you said, I don't know how much we can actually talk about mold. Well, look, we've surprised ourselves. We've gone over an hour on the subject. Lee, this has been absolutely fantastic. I wish that we'd have had this webinar last week before I bleached a mold-ridden wall, but we are where we are. I'm certainly going to be putting the products to the test later on this, I was going to say this month or later on this year, between now and Christmas at least. It's been really insightful, so thank you so much for your time. We now have access to all of these products via Johnston's Decorating Centres, and as Gareth said, they are on offer right now throughout what he rather lovingly calls mold season, and that's why he's not invited to a lot of parties. He says, come mine for Christmas, the peak of mold season. So no one goes to his house anymore. But they are available throughout the year. They're just, I think, on special price promotion at the minute. Is that right, Laura?
Yep.
Lovely. Thank you. Now, I would usually at this point say, next month we have this and next month we have that, but we don't have anything. This is the final one for 2025. Of course, LMPG still continues to push on, but we won't be having another lock-in at this time next month because it will be Christmas. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. If you do need anything from us in the meantime, you know where we are. Talk to us on the Facebook group. Give us a call in the office. If I don't speak to you between now and then, have a fantastic Christmas. Have a great new year, and I'll see you all in 2025. Good night.
Cheers. Bye now.